Dementia Researcher with a blog and a rating.
Research is about collecting and analysing evidence in an unbiased way, isn't it? Surely, therefore, it's values-free. But in reality, what evidence you aim to collect and how you aim to collect and analyse it is likely to be influenced by values that relate to your understanding of a condition like dementia. Research can also contribute to an evidence base indicating effective care and treatment interventions. But compared to other major health conditions, developing this evidence base for dementia has been challenging. What do frontline practitioners do when the evidence base is limited in this way? And what role do values play? This blog reflects on the interaction between values and evidence, not only in research, but in the lives of people with dementia and those who support them. The blog also invites listeners to think about contributing and subscribing to a journal where they can disseminate their work to dementia practitioners, regardless of the question about values. Dementia, values and research. Dementia can easily be placed in different models of disease and disability, including biomedical and biopsychosocial disease models, or the social model of disability. The models are not necessarily incompatible, but are based on quite different values. These values influence what one focuses research on, and to some extent, how one does the research as well. Crudely put, biomedical and biopsychosocial models locate dementia as a problem for the individual with the condition, and they are the focus for research and interventions, whether pharmacological or non-pharmacological. The social model of disability locates the problem of dementia primarily as a societal one. Rather than trying to fix the individual, the social model emphasizes how evidence and interventions should focus on changing attitudes, behaviors, and barriers in wider society that exclude or discriminate against people with dementia. Research methods involving things like brain scans or blood tests aren't the main focus in the social model of disability, although that doesn't mean research into cures and treatment shouldn't continue. The evidence base for the social model of disability is also more limited. Research that might demonstrate ways of changing community or population-wide social behaviours is difficult to do in terms of methodology, resources, and providing evidence of effect or causation. Yet the social model of disability has been very, very influential, partly as a result of activism by disability rights campaigners, particularly against institutional forms of care such as the old asylums. Legislation such as the UK's Equality Act 2010 are based on the social model of disability, and the model has led to very practical changes such as wheelchair access. But it was political campaigning driven by values rather than research evidence which led to these changes in law and practice. So although good research should be impartial and free from bias, decisions about research questions and topics may well reflect the values of researchers and research teams. Qualitative research is sometimes unfavorably compared with quantitative research because systematic, impartial analysis of interviews and focus groups, for example, is seen to be harder to do than that involving numerical data sets collected through laboratory testing. The latter can also be seen to be more reliable because sample sizes tend to be much bigger than with the former. Yet the publication of the book Doctored in 2025 with the subtitle of Fraud, Arrogance and Tragedy in the Quest to Cure Alzheimer's is a reminder that hard science dementia research isn't necessarily immune to dubious, if not devious values motivating some people working in the field. Written by a well-respected investigative journalist from Science magazine, Charles Pillar, the book tells the story of a much-cited 2006 research paper identifying how a subtype of amyloid led to memory impairments associated with Alzheimer's disease. The paper was subsequently retracted, as have others based around the same findings, after it was suggested that key images on which research was based might have been photoshopped. However, the retraction took place after millions had already been spent on research based on the evidence it cited. I'm a social researcher and profess no expertise in biomedical science, though somewhat ironically in 2025 I successfully completed my PhD based at the Geller Institute for Aging and Memory, which is part of the University of West London's School of Medicine and Biosciences. Values and dementia were the focus of my PhD, although I'm confident that the values I based it on were not the same as those identified by Charles Piller. Evidence-based frameworks and values-based frameworks. Biomedical and pharmacological research into dementia, which tends to use quantitative methods, absorbs a much bigger proportion of research funding than more psychosocial and qualitative research into the condition. This is partly because the complexities around implementing and measuring the impact of psychosocial interventions on a large scale. As I've already said, it's also because qualitative research isn't always considered to have the same status in terms of significance for evidence-based medicine or evidence-based practice, EBM, EBP for short, as studies involving quantitative methods. For example, the term robust is usually twinned with the phrase gold standard to describe high-quality research. But the terms are usually applied to research involving large, double-blind, quantitative, randomized controlled trials involving pharmacological treatments. My PhD was a PhD by publication, so based upon previous publications of mine I had authored or co-authored. I'll say more about the publications a bit later. My thesis explored issues involving dementia and a theoretical and practical framework known as values-based practice, or VBP for short. A key premise of VBP is that values become much more apparent in decision-making regarding care and treatment, where the evidence base is limited, non-existent, or contested. But values may differ between professional disciplines, people with dementia, and family carers about what to do in everyday situations, leading to disagreements and disputes, which can be distressing, time-consuming, and expensive. Organisations and wider society also have values which affect people with dementia. These include values expressed in law, policies on risks and safeguarding, fear, stigma, and discrimination against people with dementia, as well as more positive values, such as those expressed through the dementia-friendly community movement. To help practitioners deal with decision-making situations where evidence was limited and there were differences in values, VBP was developed in the late 1990s. There is a collaborating centre for values-based practice at Oxford University, and the website tells you more about VBP. VBP is designed to work alongside evidence-based practice, EBP, and my PhD thesis drew on published works of mine to show how the evidence they contained could contribute to the development of VBP. VBP would appear to be very relevant to dementia, where, despite strenuous research efforts, effective evidence-based interventions for individuals remain limited. Yet my thesis showed how relatively little attention values-based practice had given to dementia. Drawing on previous research projects I had led or been involved with, I went on to provide evidence about how people with dementia can continue to express values, although these are sometimes difficult for others to identify or discern. As a progressive, terminal condition affecting people's cognition, memory, and place-time relationship orientation, I gave examples of how my research showed the unique effects dementia has on a person's values or how they express them. Complicating matters further are values expressed in law. My thesis also included research I'd done, which showed how value-laden concepts such as unwise decisions and best interests in the Mental Capacity Act 2005 interacted with personal and professional values in dementia care. Legal concepts like these are a bit like solid research-based evidence, i.e., practice should be led by them. And with the law, there are sanctions if not. But there's very little research defining what they really mean, so they can still be contested, a bit like other values. Most of the research my thesis was based on was qualitative, but this provided a richness of the data I could use to explore the values-based practice framework. I concluded my thesis by drawing on a European-wide research project I led on, which explored the theory and practice of dementia-friendly communities, or DFCs. DFCs partly draw on the social model of disability, as well as legal frameworks and the lived experience of people with dementia. I showed how my research encapsulated key themes in my thesis that provided fruitful areas for VBP's future development. I also posed a question about how values could become evidence and inform decisions about care and treatment in the same way that EBP does. However, I made the point that the emphasis given to this kind of values-based evidence may differ between people with dementia, family carers, and practitioners, making decisions about dementia policy and practice challenging. While the practice of dementia research was not the main focus of my thesis, being aware, if not explicit, about the values one's research is based on is important, not least for reasons of intellectual integrity and honesty. With hindsight, perhaps I could have done this more, although by now it is probably fairly clear to the listener that values associated with rights, citizenship, and inclusion, for example, were a greater influence on my research than those associated with a biomedical disease model of dementia. And exploring VBP in relation to dementia is certainly an area that deserves more research attention. As a footnote, I got my PhD at the ripe old age of 62. It's never too late. The Journal of Dementia Care. Regardless of your interest in values, it is worth noting that in 2025, I also became the new editor of the Journal of Dementia Care, published by Dementia Community. The journal has been published for over 30 years and is particularly aimed at people working in health and social care with people affected by dementia. It contains articles about research, policy, practice, new and innovative projects relevant to dementia care. 3 issues of the journal can be found if you type in Journal of Dementia Care and go to the web pages. The most recent one was the November-December 2025 issue, which was about technology in dementia care. The journal is of a high standard and well respected in the field. It isn't peer-reviewed, so it makes it an ideal publication for researchers early in their career to develop their writing skills and confidence, and importantly, getting something published in their name. The journal is also a good way for more experienced researchers to publicize their work and demonstrate its impact, because it is read by dementia care practitioners who might not read more academic journals. So please do contact me if you have an idea for an article. The journal tends not to include articles about very technical or biomedical research unless these are of major significance. But also feel free to contact me if you want to discuss a possible article involving these topics. Readers of the journal pay a subscription to receive it, online only, although every year we publish a themed free-to-read issue, and there's also a free editor's pick article from every issue that's published. We're also keen to grow readership and circulation to increase the journal's impact. So please consider taking out a subscription to the journal and encourage anyone you know or the organisation you work for to subscribe. And there's a 25% discount on subscriptions if you pay £1 and join Dementia Community. And if this blog has made you think a bit more about values in research or dementia care, I would really like to hear from you, perhaps through another blog here or a piece for the journal. I look forward to a conversation with you or reading what you've got to say. Please contact me at Toby, that's Toby, at dementiapublishing.community. That's Toby at dementiapublishing.community. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. Join the Dementia Research bloggers and share your own views.